Morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us. We are beginning with chapter 29, verse 31. We left off on this pasuk yesterday. It says in the pasuk that Hashem saw that Leah was hated. We're trying to understand what that means. The Ramban said two pshatim. One idea was that Yaakov really resented Leah and really resented Leah's role in misleading him in the story of the marriage. The other pshat is it just means that she wasn't as loved as Rachel was. But now I'd like to see the Or HaChaim. Or HaChaim in pasuk Lamed Aleph. Vayar Hashem kisnua Leah, Yichavin Lomar, Ki Hashem levado hu sheyoda. A really interesting pshat. Only Hashem knew that Leah was hated. V'hikir ki hisnua, and Hashem perceived and recognized that Leah was hated. Lo kain he, she didn't realize she was hated. Shlo hirgisha b'sinasa elo hashayisa choshev she'inahu v'levad. She didn't, she thought it was just she wasn't as beloved as Rachel was. She didn't realize that Yaakov really resented her, which means, presumably, it means that Yaakov masked his feelings, which is something to think about. So that's the first point he makes, that the significance of Hashem seeing that Leah was hated means that it wasn't evident that he hated her. For Rabbeinu Zal Amru, Snua shayu omrim zu ishto shosona. It's a very different shot. That you know what it means? She was hated. Not that he hated her, but that people said this is the female parallel to the sone, to the hater. Who's the hater? Shehu Esav. This is That's what you were talking about yesterday. This is Esav. It says in the pasuk, Ves Esav sonesi v'tikare al shemo. So the idea is that she was associated with Esav. People said that, Lavan has two sons and his sister Rachel Lavan has two daughters and Rachel has two sons. So the older one should match up with the older one and the younger one should match up with the younger one, which means Esav is going to marry Leah. They would have said, people would have said, perhaps Yaakov would have said, that if Leah wouldn't bear children, it would be like a sign that they're not supposed to be married. So maybe what people said was right. Maybe Leah is supposed to marry Esau. Lazeva yiftach rachma. So therefore, that's the Or HaChaim, is why God opens her womb. Okay. V'omro v'rochel akara perish kule hava ulai yasur shinasa shasu en yoledas shasu yoledas. That maybe it'll improve the situation for Leah, the fact that Rachel's not having children. Maybe people will say, oh, Leah's supposed to be married to Yaakov. Maybe Leah's more supposed to be married to Yaakov than Rachel is. So that's the Or HaChaim's pshat. Okay. Going into chapter 30, verse 1. Chapter 30, verse 1. Vatera Rachel ki lo yolda liYaakov. Leah has had 3 children already. No, excuse me, 4 children. And Rachel saw that she still hasn't born any children for Yaakov. Vatzkanei Rachel ba'achosa. And Rachel felt jealousy of her sister, that her sister had married to have children. She hadn't. Vathomer Yaakov, and she said to Yaakov, Hava li vanim, give me children, vim ayin meisanoch. And if you don't give me children, I die. What does that mean? Give me children. He doesn't run the world. What does she mean by that? Verse 2. Vayichar af Yaakov b'Rachel. Yaakov became angry at Rachel. Vayomer, he said to her, Hasachas Elokim anochi. Am I God? Asher monami mech privatan, that God held back from me the ability to have children. What do you want from me? Okay. And they come up with the solution that he'll have a child with Bilhah. This is, of course, what Sarah did also. That the idea was that it would be a merit for her that she's sort of putting someone else first and putting her husband's, it's a merit for her that she provides someone with whom her husband can have a child. That's okay. Ramban on Pasuk Aleph, Havali Vanim. Amru HaMefarshim, Shetispalel Olai. So various commentaries explain what she means when she says, give me a child, is you need to daven for me. Vim ayin mesa anochi, and if not, I die. Lashon Rashi, she'ein lo banim chashuv kames. Rashi cites the famous idea that we say that if a person doesn't have children, it's like they're dead. doesn't, heaven forbid, mean like they're dead, but what it means is they're not, there's a very significant part of life that they're missing out on. So she says, it's like I'm not living if I don't have children. Vani Tama, the Ramban says, I find this very difficult to understand. Imkein lama chara apo, v'lama amar asachas elokim anochi, shomei al tzadik. So if that's what she means when she says, give me children, and what she means is you need to daven, I should have children. So why does he get angry at her? It's a good request. Let her husband, who's a righteous person, daven that she should have children. Makes sense. Umash amar abelo hayu lo banim, ani yesh li banim, mimcha mana mimeni lo mana, v'chiyat tzadikim in mispalim barachirim. There's a medrash that he responds to her. He says, let's clarify something. I have children. You don't have children, which is, it's difficult to understand even the words of that medrash. But the Ramban says, besides anything else, if all she's asking him to do is daven, so is it foreign to him, the idea of davening for another person? Fine. Maybe she's saying daven for me. So why is that a strange thing for her to say? Elio and Elisha davened for people who weren't their wives. There's a medrash that Yaakov is called to task for this response to her. This is how you speak to a woman who's in distress. So her son is going to sort of lord over, or have the ability to lord over all your other kids, because it's not how you speak to a woman. It's how you speak to a person who's in distress. So the Ramban says, so I'll tell you what I think the pshat is. The pshat we're working with up until now is that she's saying, please daven for me. It's difficult to understand why it's such an adverse reaction to that. So he says, I think the pshat is, so she says, give me children. And really what she means is, like we said, that he should daven for her. Atzma B'tzar. Says the Ramban. We had a Ramban like this in last week's parsha also. It's another person, but she says, I need you to daven for me and keep on davening until I have children. And if you're not going to daven for me, I'm going to end my life. This is too painful. Dibra Shalo Kahogan B'kinasa. That's not an appropriate thing to say, but she was so upset that her sister has it, she doesn't have. V'chashva Ki ba'avasosa yis'ana Yaakov v'yilbash sakva efer v'yispal shiyu labanim shalotamus b'tzara. So she thought that if she spoke extremely dramatically to him, he would like drop everything and really, put all of his focus into davening that she should have a child. Vayicharaf Yaakov, and then Yaakov responded with anger. Why? Why is he angry at her? It's not like, no matter how righteous the person is, it's not like there's some magic button. When I press this button, God's got to listen to me. So that's not how it works. He felt she was saying something manipulative, like, I'm going to kill myself if you don't, he didn't feel it was reasonable. So he says to her, listen, I can't decide if you're going to have a child or not. I'm happy to daven for you. The Ramban says, when he says to her, you don't have children, that is a sharp remark. But she's speaking sharply to him. She says to him, obviously she's in pain, but she says to him, I'm going to kill myself if you don't daven hard for me. He says, what do you think? You think it's all in my hands? I think this is fascinating. So now she sees, she pushes the strongest button she's got to get her husband to really daven. And it's not that he's averse to davening for her, but he says, I don't know what you're talking. You think that it's all up to me? And then once there's basically a wall in front of her on that side, then she realizes that that's not the strongest button she has. She realizes the strongest button she has is her own prayers. El shomea tza'aka, v'zehu vayishma eleha elokim. There are various examples like this in Tanakh, that a person is in great need for something, and they go to a great pious person, and the tefillah does work, doesn't work, and then they finally realize they just have to daven for themselves. We had actually not such a different the story of Chana, people from the Wednesday night class. It was not so long ago that we studied it. The story of Chana. So Chana was so distraught, and she speaks to Elkanah, her husband, and he basically says, we have a good life together. And one of the Mefarshim, I forgot which one. One of the Mefarshim says, and at that point she realized she really had to daven for herself. She couldn't put it in anyone else's basket anymore. So Rachel speaks extremely powerfully to Yaakov, passionately to Yaakov. And he says, I sound like I run the show. So she realizes there is something else for her to do. The Ramban says, of course Yaakov has been davening for his wife. Why wouldn't he daven for his wife? He has great affection for her. She doesn't have a child. Of course he's been davening for her. Your father, so she says to him, your father was able to daven for your mother to have you, Nesav. So why can't you daven for me? He says another pshat. He says, maybe you're not supposed to have children. Maybe you're just not supposed to have children. Maybe that's the pshat. Not this is not a cut down. This is maybe Yitzchak had to have a child. This was the whole assurance that there'd be a nation that came from them. Maybe you're just not. Maybe it's just not meant to be. That, of course, could be sometimes. It's one of the greater challenges in tefillah. Okay, but this is the Ramban. It's very powerful to think about. Let's jump ahead to verse 17. Leah has stopped giving birth, and for reasons that should be clear from our earlier discussions in the week, it was a very big deal. It's obviously a big deal for anyone to have a child, but for Leah, the dynamic of having children, having many children, is very significant in the dynamics of her relationship with Yaakov. Verse 17, Vayishma Elokim el Leah, and God listened to Leah. Vatar vatela Yaakov, bein chamishi, and she gave, and then she bore a fifth son to Yaakov. What does it mean? God listened to Leah. What was Leah saying? I mean, we don't have that she's like, it doesn't say in Psukim that she's davening. So Rashi on Pasuk Zayin, Vayishma Elokim el Leah, Shoisimus Ave Machzeres Laharbos Shvatim. God heard her, meaning God understood what she really wanted. She so much wanted to have more children, to build more of a percentage of the tribe of Klal Yisrael. We didn't discuss it here, but there's this famous story with the Dugoyim, with the mandrakes, which is a complicated story. But at least one shot in it is that Reuven, her son, that these mandrakes had the capacity to help a woman be fertile. So Reuven, her son, went looking for mandrakes for his mother. But in any event, God saw how much she wanted, so God blessed her with another child. We discussed this morning the Rachayim, his perspective of what it means that Leah was hated. We discussed the Ramban's perspective on the discussion, the conversation between Rachel and Yaakov regarding Yaakov giving her a son.